Hey everyone, we're at CES 2020. I'm at the Be Quiet suite now. And they've got two new coolers we're talking about. I also want to go on a tangent about TDP, how it works, so everybody watching understands what those numbers mean. And then also a Pure Base 500DX. And when I asked, did you come up with what DX stands for right now? The answer was no, but it was deluxe. I don't think that's what it stands for. So the Pure Base 500DX will cover, I guess let's do that first because it's quick and it doesn't involve tangents on TDP. It's the Pure Base 500. The tooling is more or less identical. There are a few changes I'll go over. Before that, this video is brought to you by Thermaltake's Tough RAM RGB memory, available from 3000 megahertz up to 4400 megahertz in 8 GB by 2 configurations. The Thermaltake Tough RAM uses 10 addressable RGB LEDs for bright illumination and comes in both black and white kits of memory. Learn more at the link in the description below. If you already know what the Pure Base 500 is internally, then you know what this case is, the 500DX. So tooling has not changed. The front panel's changed. The top's got a different filter to it. I'll talk about too. But primary changes would just be if you kind of liked the idea of the Pure Base 500, which was supposed to be a Be Quiet version of a budget-targeted case, then I mean, cool. Except there wasn't a whole lot of airflow, and I think everybody watching knows how I feel about that. So this is a more airflow-targeted version. A couple things on this. So front panel's got these two rather large mesh strips. They're not quite as big for actual intake as they look because there's some plastic bleed over here that you need for, one, the clips that actually mount it to the chassis, and two, structural support. So you've got some loss, maybe about an inch or so loss there from the mesh, but there's still a large hole here, a large hole here. How it performs, we kind of tested a design similar to this with the Landcool 1, the original, and depending on how you kitted the fans out, it wasn't bad. It just takes, you need to spend a little bit more time thinking about it. But it's not bad. It's certainly better than a closed off panel in terms of airflow. For the paneling, let's see if I can safely do this. The paneling is connected with a set of pins. So it's pins to pads. This has been really popular. Maybe the last, I'd say 8 to 10 months or so, we've seen more of this. So it's still pretty new, but I like this. Your alternative is just running this cable, the LED cable, straight into the case, which kind of sucks because then you can't rip the panel off like I just did. So it's pins to pads, and there's, I mean, I don't know, it's not like it's the newest technology, but it's still great to see it because cables are annoying to deal with. It is double filtered, so there's a mesh on the front. It's not the finest of fine mesh, which is, there's no problem with that, but it does mean that there's another layer of mesh filtering behind it. Sometimes you have some additional, well, you always have additional impedance there from a static pressure standpoint. The good news is that the filter is seated back quite a bit, maybe eyeballing it here, maybe a couple inches. Sorry, I'm working in freedom units because I don't have a calculator with me. Maybe a couple inches from the front. So the good news with that is when you're seated back a bit with an extra filter, there's less risk of the mesh material interlacing with the holes on the front mesh, so you don't have as much additional impedance, but we need to test it. So overall though, I'm happy to see Be Quiet case with airflow. That's really not something we've seen a lot of. The Pure Base 500 was a really interesting chassis to me, and this is a direction I'd like to see it keep going. So we'll have to test it, see how it does. But that's the 500DX. Really, that's the main change. Top's just got this filter that's inside of a plastic piece, so it's more of a mechanical thing, a bit easier, you know, human factors, I guess is what you would call it, human factors improvement there. So I think we can move on from that one, pretty simple. The coolers, there's a Shadow Rock 3 and a Pure Rock 2. And this is where I want to talk about TDP for a second before proceeding. So Be Quiet has a TDP system it uses, and I'm fine with it the way it works, as long as everyone understands how it works. TDP at the heart of it, what you really want to know with a cooling solution is how much heat can it dissipate. All of the power that goes into a CPU, almost all of it, like if you're going to actually meet, it's almost all of it, turns into heat. It doesn't glow, it doesn't move. There's no other place for the energy to go except heat for the most part. And no transistors doing things doesn't count. So when it all turns into heat, one of the better ways to figure out how much can the cooler handle is to run just a dummy heater, which we've shown before, TTV, stuff like that. You pump heat into it from a benchtop power supply, you set it equal to something like 180, and you position the resistors in the heater. You can use MOSFETs if you want to generate heat in specific locations, so you can simulate either like monolithic die or you can do a chiplet approach like AMD does. But either way, what you're doing ultimately is pushing heat into it, and then you figure out at what speed or what size cooler is required to keep the temperature of your thermistor, your thermocouple on the synthesized IHS at degree X. So you set the temperature, and then that's how you'd measure it. So Be Quiet's system is that. They're just using a dummy heater TTV with power pumped into it, and then you get a number out, like 180 watts or 150 watts on this one. That doesn't mean 180 watts or 150 watts by AMD's magical out of the air TDP numbers or Intel's magical out of the air numbers. It means 180 or 150 watts based on the power from the external source going into it, which is how it should be. So you can compare these numbers. All of that rant is because when you hear the numbers 180 and 150, I don't want people to think, oh, that means something related to CPUs, because the CPU companies have made sure it doesn't. So anyway, what you can do with the number is compare it between other Be Quiet coolers. And actually, I've been wrong. This one's 190, not 180. So that's the coolers. 190 versus the previous one, no bearing on. You can't compare that number to other coolers on the market that don't test the same way. You can compare it against other Be Quiet coolers. And anyway, Shadowrock 3 is an interesting one just because it's supposed to be a $50 cooler, so it's a bit more on the cheaper end in terms of bigger air coolers. Now, even though it's large, the fin density is a bit lowered, so you drop some cost there. But depending on how the fan is configured, I haven't really tested these fans for static pressure or anything, but lower density of fins does mean that you have less impedance for flow for the fan, so you could actually end up with a net positive depending on how it's been configured and tested, what kind of fan's on there. The fan is 0.2 amps. It's 1600 RPM. The Pure Rock 2 is 1500 RPM, also 0.2 amp fan. And for pricing on these, so that one I just picked up is 50, that's Shadowrock 3. And then this one's supposed to be, depending on which color you get, 40, 45 for the black variant. And this does have pre-applied paste, and the Shadowrock comes with a tube of paste. It looks like maybe Dow Corning or something. Pre-applied paste is a bit cheaper from what I understand, so that's the typical reason to go with that. But I think that covers the coolers for the most part. We've got the pricing, we've got the RPMs, and then availability for the DX, the 500 DX I didn't hit. So that's supposed to be March, about $100. That'll wrap up Be Quiet. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more. Go to store.gamersnexus.net to help us out directly, or check out this guy also on YouTube. What's your name?
Leo, apparently.
Okay, I don't know. He just came in off
Kit
the...
Guru.
Kit Guru.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We're just coming off the street. We've just been invited over to join the great man himself.
It looked like you needed some help on the street.
I'll take every scrap. He's my British showing.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So check them out as well. Kit Guru on YouTube. Thanks for watching. We'll see you all next time.